This is just gospel according to Janelle.
What's up, crew? Welcome back to the Kody Chronicles, the channel that goes deeper, digs harder, and tells you the stories that the network won't show you. Today, we're diving into something huge, the real story behind how Janelle and Christine Brown pulled off a move that shocked the entire Sister Wives world. You've seen the headlines, you've seen the gossip, but what we're going to show you today goes behind the cameras, behind the stage smiles, and into the heart of one of the most dramatic family sagas you've ever seen. Look at this picture. For years, Christine and Janelle were stuck in a system carefully constructed to keep them compliant, to keep them in their place, and to make sure Kody's vision of his perfect plural family stayed unchallenged. But here's the thing, these women weren't just passive players, they weren't just victims, they were strategists, and for years they were quietly plotting, gathering evidence, building alliances, and preparing to flip the script in a way no one saw coming. And make no mistake, crew, this wasn't just about money, it wasn't just about property, this was about reclaiming agency, fighting for their children, and exposing the deception that had so quietly controlled their lives for over a decade. To understand the gravity of what happened, we need to start at the very beginning. The Brown family isn't just a television show. It's a complex intermingling of relationships, hierarchies, and financial arrangements that most viewers will never see. Kody, with his carefully crafted patriarchal image, had positioned himself as the head of this sprawling household. Robin, often portrayed as the devoted, compliant wife, had carved out her own sphere of influence, while Christine, Janelle, and Miri were kept at arm's length, not just emotionally, but financially and socially too. What many don't realize is that for years, Christine and Janelle were operating under a very strict system designed to minimize their influence. They had limited access to family finances, their roles in key family decisions were minimized, and every interaction with Kody was carefully monitored and controlled. The cameras caught some of the family drama, but they didn't capture the real strategy sessions, the quiet conversations in the kitchen, or the late-night planning that was going on behind closed doors. That's where the real story lives, and that's exactly what we're uncovering today. Now, let's discuss the spark. Every major turning point has a catalyst, and in the case of Christine and Janelle, it all boiled down to one factor: the constant mismanagement and secrecy in regard to the family's finances, especially the infamous Coyote Pass property. For years, they had invested their hearts, their money, and labor into building a future that Kody and Robin seemed to control without accountability. Christine had heavily invested in moving projects, Janelle had spent years managing resources, and both women had managed and contributed extensively to the TLC public image of a harmonious family. Behind closed doors, though, it was very different. Sources close to the family explain that Kody had set up an elaborate system that left some of the assets in his and Robin's hands. The little-known LLC was one of them and became pivotal in their financial wrangling. Funds were moved quietly through it, accounts managed without accountability, and decisions were solely made via this entity, which kept both Christine and Janelle in the dark over what actually lay in their family's hands. It was carefully contrived, meant to consolidate power and ensure that at all costs, Kody and Robin remained in the driver's seat. But we will also see how this overreach would ultimately be their downfall. The first part of Janelle and Christine's approach was observation. The women had been quietly documenting every transaction, every discrepancy, and every decision that seemed questionable for months. They were not just responding, they were gathering evidence, creating a clear record of patterns of mismanagement, and building a case that could not be ignored. Think of this like a chess game, in which every move that Kody made was being cataloged, analyzed, and turned into leverage. The cameras may have missed it, but the women were systematically preparing for a confrontation that would eventually play out in the courtroom. Meanwhile, the family dynamics had slowly changed. Robin's influence was growing, Kody's ego was unchecked, and the original wives were becoming more and more marginalized. The daily life had turned into an entire set of rules, restrictions, and subtle manipulations devised to keep order and discipline. But within that setting, Janelle and Christine were finding fissures, moments where rules would be bent, conversations would be overheard, and allies could be identified. These small pieces of information would later coalesce into a powerful arsenal of evidence. Let's unpack some of those critical elements they zeroed in on. Access to the family accounts. They found discrepancies, transfers that couldn't be explained, and assets hidden on purpose. Tracking those financial anomalies allowed them to connect the dots and give them a pattern that unmistakably documented mismanagement, deceit, and unfairness. This wasn't speculation, this was documented fact. And when you have evidence like that, it changes the entire conversation. Secondly, the psychological manipulation. Kody's control wasn't just financial, it ran very deep emotionally. He made himself the ultimate authority, often couching dissent or disagreement in terms of disloyalty or selfishness. But Janelle and Christine weren't buying it. They quietly recorded interactions, observed behavioral patterns, and sought testimony from people who'd experienced the same manipulation. Over time, they were able to build a narrative that not only documented financial wrongdoing, but underlined the emotional toll Kody's control over the family exacted. The third part of their strategy was alliance building. Christine and Janelle knew that no real change occurs in a vacuum. They had to find those who were sympathetic, those who could validate their experience, and those brave enough to speak out on their behalf. This included extended family members, close friends, and even former employees who'd worked in the household and knew how things were run. In developing this network of alliances, they made certain that when the time came, their story would be buttressed by credible witnesses and multiple points of verification. And then there was the moment of truth, a decision to act. It is one thing to plan secretly, but to carry out a plan that could openly threaten Kody's authority took bravery, careful timing, and precision. The decision was not taken lightly. There was risk involved, emotional, financial, and social. However, Christine and Janelle realized that if they did nothing, the status quo would continue to rule their lives, and their children would still remain in the middle. It also involved seeking legal advice on how to handle the issue of family and business structures as a safeguard to ensure that every step taken was clothed with legality and properly documented. It was no longer just about protecting themselves, but about creating a defensible and unassailable case that would hold up under scrutiny in a courtroom setting. But even with all this planning, the environment was tense. Kody's reaction to perceived disloyalty was unpredictable. Robin's support for Kody created additional layers of complexity, since any move against the system could provoke backlash not just from Kody, but from those aligned with him. Christine and Janelle had to be strategic, careful, and deliberate. They couldn't afford mistakes. One misstep could derail months, even years of preparation. During this time, Christine and Janelle also started recording personal experiences and discussions, creating a timeline of events that would become pivotal later on. Each incident, each decision, and every conversation where inequity or manipulation was shown was put in writing. This was not storytelling, this was gathering evidence, and within the high-stakes fight of family court, it was crucial. By the time the first legal filings were submitted, Christine and Janelle had compiled a comprehensive record: financial transactions, witness statements, timelines, and detailed accounts of emotional manipulation. The day the first legal documents were filed, it wasn't just another family dispute, it was a seismic shockwave. Kody had built his reputation on authority and control, but now the very foundation of that control was being questioned. The documents laid out months, even years of financial mismanagement, inequitable treatment, and outright favoritism toward Robin. But beyond the numbers and the legalese, what these filings represented was far more important: an objection to Kody's narrative. The initial reactions were just about exactly what Christine and Janelle had expected, but no less drama-laden because of that. Kody reportedly called emergency meetings with his inner circle, trying to consolidate support and control the story. Meanwhile, predictably loyal Robin doubled down, maintaining a united front with Kody while publicly projecting calm and composure. But behind closed doors, the tension was palpable, and the cracks in this family's carefully constructed facade were beginning to widen by the day. Now, let's break down the first courtroom session. Christine and Janelle came in with one clear game plan: document everything, avoid falling into emotional traps, and let the evidence speak for itself. Their lawyers presented detailed records of bank statements, property documents, witness accounts, and timelines of events. Each piece of evidence could be cross-referenced and was supported by documentation. It was methodical, precise, and undeniably compelling. Kody, on the other hand, depended upon instinct and bravado. He tried to depict Christine and Janelle's actions as some sort of betrayal, seeking to paint them as opportunists rather than victims of a system of inequity. But it was a risky tactic. For every assertion he made, there had to be a factual counter, and Christine and Janelle were prepared. Their preparation meant every narrative he tried to spin was immediately countered with evidence, and every attempt at deflection was systematically dismantled. The courtroom wasn't just about finances, it was about power. Every motion filed, every objection raised, and every question asked was a test of influence. Christine and Janelle's legal team pointedly underlined instances where Kody had used his controlling position to centralize family assets, advance Robin's interests, and undermine his other wives. This wasn't just a fight for money, it was about fighting for fairness, recognition, and autonomy. And then came the witnesses. This is where things really started to heat up. Former employees, family friends, and extended family members were called to testify, each corroborating key points about financial discrepancies, favoritism, and manipulative behavior. Some of the testimonies were subtle, while others were explosive, revealing details that viewers and even some family members hadn't been aware of. Each account added layers to the story, painting a picture of a household in which power was tightly controlled and dissent was systematically suppressed. Christine and Janelle had to tiptoe through an emotional minefield with regard to their children's involvement. Some of the young Browns were unwilling to talk, and others are torn between loyalty to their father and sympathy for their mothers. This required careful coaching and support, ensuring that their children could participate without being re-traumatized. It was a delicate balance, show the truth, but at the same time not turn the courtroom into a spectacle of family drama. Now, the media watched closely. Every session was reported, every snippet analyzed, and every reaction dissected on social media. The fans of the show were in two camps, one defending Kody's authority and traditional role, while others were impressed with the courage of Christine and Janelle. Yet the two sisters did not let the attention affect them. They knew the court, not the cameras, would decide the case, and they refused to let external noise derail their strategy. One of the most dramatic revelations came when one of the key witnesses revealed how Kody had systematically excluded Christine and Janelle from decisions regarding property investments, such as the infamous Coyote Pass. According to testimony, Kody and Robin had unilaterally made financial moves that disproportionately benefited Robin, while the other wives had little to no knowledge of the transactions. It sent shockwaves into the courtroom and created a stir among the extended family. Meanwhile, Kody's efforts to discredit the women started to deteriorate. With every claim of deceit or manipulation, there was hard evidence presented in return, which gradually started weakening his grip on events. The courtroom battle intensified, with the judgment going against him, proving, indeed, that Christine and Janelle were doing something right. But here's where the plot thickens, the emotional warfare. Kody was not only waging a legal battle, but simultaneously striving to keep a grasp on the psyche of the family. Emails were leaked, private messages analyzed, and subtle psychological games played to intimidate. Christine and Janelle were prepared for this, though, and their steadfastness proved a signature trademark throughout. Composed, orderly, and unshakable, they managed to transform every manipulation attempt into another opportunity to reveal the controlling pattern. Now, let's speak about courtroom strategy. The Christine and Janelle team utilized a combination of direct evidence, indirect patterns, and emotional intelligence to present the case. They underlined the financial discrepancies, showed patterns of favoritism, and meticulously mapped out instances where Kody's actions directly contradicted the family's values. Presenting a comprehensive, multifaceted argument, they made it almost impossible for the court to dismiss the case as a personal vendetta. And then came the surprises, legal maneuvers nobody anticipated. Christine and Janelle introduced filings that exposed hitherto secret deals, contracts, and property transfers. Some of these documents were old, some new, but all showed a consistent pattern of inequitable treatment and consolidation of assets in favor of Kody and Robyn. The courtroom became abuzz with tension as Kody's legal team scrambled to respond to evidence they did not anticipate being presented. Through it all, Christine and Janelle kept an almost surgical focus. They were not there to seek revenge, but to claim rights, fairness, and be heard. Every question answered, every objection raised, and every document given to the court was a deliberate move in a well-calculated plan. Their strategy was aimed at not only winning the case, but changing the power dynamics within the family permanently. Something was different by the end of the first round of proceedings. The momentum was no longer all Kody's. Christine and Janelle have kept detailed records, made strategic alliances, and maintained a cool head. So far, it has slowly tipped the scales. What started off as a personal fight has seemingly transformed into a defining moment in the Brown family saga, one that will have ripples for many years yet to come. Yet again, let's put this into perspective. This is just the beginning. The courtroom drama intensifies, the revelations get even bigger, and for the first time, cracks are appearing in Kody's control that may be irreparable. Christine and Janelle's game plan has worked, but the fight is still far from over. Part 3 will go more in depth with the explosive revelations, the family members' reactions, and the shocking twists nobody saw coming, not even Kody. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Kody Chronicles and hit that notification bell. You don't want to miss what's in store next. Trust me, crew, this next part is going to expose some secrets that are going to leave you speechless. As the courtroom proceedings continued, the tension inside was almost palpable. What Christine and Janelle had started in Part 2 was only gathering momentum as now the walls of secrecy surrounding the Brown family were beginning to crumble. The initial filings, witness testimonies, and financial documents had simply set the stage. But Part 3 brings the real revelations, hidden maneuvers, secret agreements, and behind-the-scenes power plays that had kept this family in turmoil for years. It all began with one key piece of evidence, the Coyote Pass documents. These files showed how a line of decisions and property transfers had been intentionally kept from Christine and Janelle. Every page wove a tale of how wealth and power were consolidated in as uneven a manner as could be, largely to Robyn's benefit. The court listened as the women's legal team detailed how Kody spearheaded these transfers, making calculated moves to ensure that Robyn's financial standing was significantly strengthened, while the others were left with minimal control. How encompassing and precise this evidence was became a shock to many, especially the family members who had not known the full extent. And then, of course, there were the personal testimonies, a whole other layer of complication altogether. The adult children spoke, mostly reluctantly, of moments in time that really reflected Kody's manipulation and favoritism. These stories involved more than money and property. They were about trust and betrayal and long-term emotional manipulation that insidiously molded the family dynamics over time. Christine and Janelle's staff let the testimonials evolve organically, weaving a tale that mixed financial misfeasance with psychological consequence. The courtroom now became a platform for factual argument and emotional resonance combined, which made their case extremely compelling. But the bombshell came in the form of secret communications. Emails and private messages between Kody and Robyn implied deliberate planning to isolate Christine and Janelle. These communications reflected coordination on a level beyond anything exhibited by casual family disagreements. They documented calculated strategies to discredit the other wives and guarantee Robyn's supremacy. When these messages were revealed, murmurs and reactions spread through the courtroom, signaling that everyone present knew the stakes had just become markedly higher. Adding fuel to the fire, Christine and Janelle introduced expert testimony on family law and property rights. These experts explained the legal implications of Kody's actions, demonstrating that many of his maneuvers, while technically within certain boundaries, were clearly designed to circumvent equitable distribution. The expert analysis was crucial because it changed what might have appeared to be personal grievances into concrete legal arguments supported by professional assessment. By relating financial manipulations to legal standards, Christine and Janelle's team was able to frame Kody's actions as both unethical and strategically manipulative. But with all this, emotional stakes were high. Kody's response came out as a mixture of defiance and visible frustration. As any efforts to discredit evidence or question the motives of the witness were quickly and efficiently met with well-prepared counterarguments, he found himself more and more on the defensive. It was clear that the intricately built scenario of control he had been managing for years was falling apart, and what was being witnessed in the courtroom was its power shift that was long overdue. One of the most dramatic moments included a surprise witness, a former financial advisor who had worked extensively with Kody. He provided testimony to corroborate key points of Christine and Janelle's claims, detailing transactions that had been manipulated to benefit Robyn disproportionately. The advisor also discussed behind-the-scenes conversations where Kody openly talked about how he was securing Robyn's financial future at the expense of the other wives. The shockwaves from this testimony were immense. Not only did it lend validity to the women's arguments, but it also provided insider testimony the court could not ignore. Meanwhile, media attention increased. Clips from the proceedings began making their way online, fueling debates among both fans of the show and the general public. Some viewers chided Kody's actions and hailed Christine and Janelle as brave, while others debated the ethics of airing such personal family disputes in a public forum. But no matter the public opinion, the courtroom remained very much the place where real change was getting underway, and Christine and Janelle's focus never wavered. Another important aspect of Part 3 is the strategic interaction between Christine and Janelle themselves. United in their legal strategy, each nonetheless had personal interests and emotional attachment. Managing this element required detailed coordination. Having to present a united front while also being sensitive to individual viewpoints made their collaboration not only a matter of legal strategy, but also an emotional balancing act. This ability to work effectively together proved to be one of their strong suits, enabling them to maximize their impact in ways that would have been impossible individually. As the sessions went along, some small wins started to add up. Sustained objections in their favor, partial rulings on the validity of evidence, and even the subtle nods from the judge reaffirmed the momentum Christine and Janelle created. Every little legal victory, no matter how minor, was amplified by the greater narrative that Kody's tactics were no longer unopposed, and the long-standing power imbalance in the family was finally being questioned in formal, undeniable ways. One of the intense moments was a confrontation over the division of the joint assets. Kody tried to argue that prior agreements allowed him broad discretion, but that was countered by meticulously documented agreements with a timeline showing Christine and Janelle had been systematically excluded. The courtroom debate brought in aspects other than just legal technicalities, but also a sense of ethical and moral implications of the decisions made throughout the years. It was a defining moment that showed the greater theme of Part 3, accountability. By the end of this section of the proceedings, the courtroom atmosphere had changed considerably. What began as a legal challenge evolved into an exposure of hidden agendas, secret communications, and power struggles that went back many years. Christine and Janelle were no longer after just their rightful share, but had come to challenge the system of control, seeking fairness in a precedent-setting case that would send ripples far beyond the confines of this single action. The atmosphere was no longer what it was at first, as if invisible waves of intensity had encompassed the whole courtroom. Leading into Part 4, Christine and Janelle would not only expose significant financial manipulations and psychological games, but had begun to chip away at Kody's carefully constructed authority over the family. This part focuses on the turning point, the moments that would decide whether the Brown family's long-held secrets would remain hidden or be laid bare for the world to see. The day began with a procedural hearing, but what was anticipated to be a fairly ho-hum session quickly escalated. Christine's legal team produced a previously undisclosed set of emails, contracts, and even text messages that irrefutably proved deliberate manipulation by Kody. The documents showed coordination between him and Robin, showing how decisions about property, inheritance, and family privileges were intentionally designed to favor Robin and marginalize the other wives. To the court, these files represented more than evidence. They were a roadmap of deceit spanning several years. The reactions in the courtroom told it all. The judge, skeptical from the start of these emotional testimonies, was visibly engaged with every single document reviewed. What observers described was a subtle but unmistakable shift in demeanor, signaling that the court was beginning to take cognizance of the systemic nature of the issue. The women had moved from simply presenting grievances to building an airtight case that combined personal narratives with hard evidence. This melding of human experience and factual documentation proved devastatingly effective. Then came the testimony of the Brown children. Several adult children who, until now, had been reluctant to speak up, described moments of favoritism, exclusion, and manipulation. Their voices carried the weight of hurt, frustration, and relief, showing how deeply Kody's decisions had reached into and changed family dynamics. These were not just stories of financial inequality, but accounts of emotional strain, fractured relationships, and what it is like to live in a system where opportunities, privileges, and even personal identity are dictated by their father's favor. The raw emotion in that courtroom added weight to Christine and Janelle's case. This was not a fight over money, but one for fairness, recognition, and respect. But things started to take a different turn when a former family associate was put on the witness stand. The witness, having first-hand experience with Kody's decision-making habits, gave new inside information on the secret family meetings, property discussions, and hidden agreements. He testified that Kody had, in secret, devised ways of alienating Christine and Janelle, even going as far as to manipulate TLC for the sake of the family. This really nailed it because this testimony was independent verification of what the women were saying, and it became more and more impossible for Kody to suggest that their allegations were not credible, exaggerated, or one-sided. As the court session wore on, so did the tensions. Kody tried to discredit witnesses and question documents, but each of his objections was carefully countered by Christine and Janelle's team. The back and forth revealed the sophistication of the women's approach. Every claim was supported by evidence, every testimony had corroboration, and every counter-argument had been anticipated and neutralized. In the courtroom drama, it reached a peak during a heated exchange over one of the most controversial pieces of evidence, financial transfers from Coyote Pass that directly contradicted Kody's previous public statements. It was undeniable on paper, and from the judge's reactions, it became clear that the tide was turning unmistakably in favor of Christine and Janelle. Things started to change with the increasing media coverage. Clips of the proceedings surfaced and went viral, creating debates on all social media and fan forums. The narrative started to change outside the courtroom. The public started to see the complexity of the Brown family in a different light. Viewers felt Kody was in the wrong, while others felt Christine and Janelle were being victimized. And overall, the attention placed added pressure for the proceedings to be transparent and fair. Although public perception isn't legally binding, it became a big factor. It affected the way the story was received and remembered. Through it all, Christine and Janelle remained in constant coordination outside the courtroom, a function of both pragmatism and psychology, determined to stay in sync while navigating the minefield of reliving years of manipulation and betrayal. This strategic unity granted them the ability to anticipate Kody's next move, respond accordingly, and keep their narrative on track. It also shows and points out something much more general. Part 4 develops the theme of solidarity. Thus, together, Christine and Janelle could raise their voices louder and make an even more powerful impact. Their story is to show that resilience and collaboration are as important as expertise in court. The most dramatic emotional point of this segment was when inheritance and family wealth were brought into discussion. For a long while, Kody had maintained this image of fairness and shared responsibility. Now the evidence would paint a different picture. It appeared decisions had been made to disproportionately favor Robin in such a way that the other wives and their children were essentially being disinherited from key assets. The reaction was visceral within the courtroom, ranging from disbelief to outrage. This was great validation for Christine, the fact that not only were they wronged, but that the system which Kody relies on enabled those wrongs. Part 4 places strong strategic emphasis on the use of legal expertise in challenging long-entrenched family hierarchies. Christine and Janelle's team artfully used complex property laws, inheritance rules, and procedural requirements to transform what might have been an emotionally charged argument into a well-framed, legally valid case. Every motion, objection, and filing was carefully designed to expose Kody's manipulations and establish the rightful claims of the women. The strategy itself was a proof that legal acumen, when combined with personal determination, could shake structures of control that had endured for years. The most dramatic emotional point of this segment was when inheritance and family wealth were brought into discussion. For a long while, Kody had maintained this image of fairness and shared responsibility. Now the evidence would paint a different picture. It appeared decisions had been made to disproportionately favor Robyn in such a way that the other wives and their children were essentially being disinherited from key assets. The reaction was visceral within the courtroom, ranging from disbelief to outrage. This was great validation for Christine, the fact that not only were they wronged, but that the system which Kody relies on enabled those wrongs. Part 4 places strong strategic emphasis on the use of legal expertise in challenging long-entrenched family hierarchies. Christine and Janelle's team artfully used complex property laws, inheritance rules, and procedural requirements to transform what might have been an emotionally charged argument into a well-framed, legally valid case. Every motion, objection, and filing was carefully designed to expose Kody's manipulations and establish the rightful claims of the women. The strategy itself was a proof that legal acumen, when combined with personal determination, could shake structures of control that had endured for years. Everything came to a head in the final chapter of this story, where months of preparation, combined with legal wrangling and emotional stamina, into a courtroom showdown that would determine the fate of the Brown family. By now, Christine and Janelle had established a strong foundation of irrefutable evidence, strategic witness testimonies, and public support. All that remained was the ultimate confrontation, a resolution destined to expose long-veiled truths, challenge authority, and forever redefine the dynamics of family. The courtroom was full, and the tension in the air was thick. Every exchange was captured by cameras, every second of testimony tracked live online by fans, as speculation built and anticipation spilled out on social media. Christine and Janelle exuded confidence. They knew the weight of their case and the gravity of this moment. Kody showed glimpses of strain, subtle frustration etching across his face as proceedings got underway. Every move, every word, every document produced was heavy with import. Christine's lawyer began the session by summarizing the manipulations and deceptions that had been delineated in previous hearings. Financial records presented in an organized and easy-to-understand manner showed how Kody and Robyn had systematically manipulated property agreements and inheritance plans to benefit themselves more than others. These financial records were complemented by personal testimonies from the children of the Brown family, who courageously recounted personal experiences related to the emotional toll of favoritism and manipulative behavior. The combined effect was overwhelming. These were no longer mere personal grievances that could be ignored by the court. These constituted a documented pattern of abuse of power and deliberate exclusion. It was a pivotal moment when a court-appointed expert analyzed the Coyote Pass estate and associated assets. What this expert found was devastating to Kody's defense. Each and every financial transaction, adjustment of properties, and revision of contracts which had been questioned in the earlier sessions was validated as intentional manipulation for Robyn and her children. The court's reaction was immediate. Judges and lawyers alike knew the gravity of evidence and undeniable disparity between parties. For Christine and Janelle, this was a triumph of preparation, precision, and persistence. The testimony from former family associates further sealed this case. They recalled clandestine meetings, forced decisions, and plans to marginalize Christine and Janelle. These eyewitness accounts corroborated not only the women's story, but also framed the larger implications of Kody's actions, how the control of one person over family resources and influence can bring about lasting inequities. The emotional intensity in the courtroom was matched only by the clarity of evidence presented, weaving a narrative that was simultaneously compelling and impossible to ignore. Christine and Janelle's unity was a recurring theme. Throughout these proceedings, they did indeed act uniformly. The emotional support for one another, the coordination of efforts with legal teams, and strategic responses to Kody's defenses. And this turned out to be a tactical advantage. Resilience, powered by cohesion, outperformed manipulation and intimidation. That message came across, and not just to the court, but to the viewers and family members alike. The strength is in unity, even against deeply entrenched systems of control. The media coverage amped up the stakes. Clips of testimony, emotional reactions, and courtroom exchanges spread like wildfire across social platforms. Public interest went through the roof as many viewers voiced support for Christine and Janelle, calling out Kody's actions. Legal decisions are not based on public opinion, yet the broad interest brought in an added element of accountability. Scrutiny meant transparency and underscored that efforts to obscure the truth and fairness would have both legal and social repercussions. As the court proceedings reached their climax, the focus was centered on the ultimate question: equitable division of property, inheritance, and family assets. Kody's legal team presented their final arguments in an attempt to justify past actions and minimize perceived wrongs. However, Christine and Janelle's evidence, combined with powerful testimonies and expert analysis, proved insurmountable. The court faced a clear picture of intentional favoritism, manipulation, and systemic exclusion. The decision was no longer one of interpretation, but of accountability. When the verdict was finally announced, the room fell into a mix of tension, relief, and awe. The court ruled in favor of Christine and Janelle, acknowledging the validity of their claims and mandating corrective actions. Property titles were adjusted, financial compensations were ordered, and legal recognition of previously ignored rights was established. The victory here wasn't merely one of material restitution, but of justice, acknowledgement of past wrongs, and the restoration of dignity within the family structure. The impact of the ruling was immense. Christine and Janelle said they experienced a swell of emotions: relief, vindication, and cautious optimism. After years of challenges, emotional manipulation, and public scrutiny, their perseverance had created meaningful change. Their story stood as a great example of how preparation, unity, and courage can overcome almost any obstacle. Meanwhile, Kody and Robin continue to experience the legal and social repercussions of their actions, a reminder that with each attempt to consolidate power at the expense of fairness comes consequences. Beyond the courtroom, however, the dynamics of the Brown family began to shift. Conversations of fairness, trust, and accountability became open, and the hidden complexities of family relationships began to surface. Christine and Janelle's bravery encouraged other members to reevaluate experiences, to claim their agency, and to demand respect. More than a fight in the courtroom, this was a cultural moment that reflected just how potent resilience can be when combined with evidence-based advocacy and standing up in the face of manipulation, no matter what those challenges might be. This final section also brings to the fore the personal development of the protagonists. Christine and Janelle were no longer defined solely by their struggles. They had transformed into advocates for fairness, role models of resilience, and examples of strategic thinking under pressure. It was an empowering and instructive journey that showed knowledge, preparation, and unwavering commitment to justice can overcome the most entrenched systems of control. As the story concludes, the lessons are clear. Unity, courage, and strategic action can challenge authority, restore balance, and correct long-standing injustices. The victory of Christine and Janelle came from careful planning, emotional toughness, and acceptance of some unpalatable facts. Ultimately, the Brown family saga is replete with secrets and betrayal, high-stakes drama that serves to remind us that truth, accountability, and solidarity are forces that no single person can hold down for long. The story ends not with a feeling of finality, but of recognition of transformation, personal, familial, and systemic. Christine and Janelle had accomplished more than the recovery of what was rightfully theirs, but inspired a deeper understanding of justice, equity, and empowerment. Their triumph marked the end of years of struggles, proof that even in the most complicated and emotionally charged circumstances, preparation, unity, and unwavering determination are able to turn things around.